coming this morning. My name is Barb Vite. I am the Director of Parish Stewardship for the Archdiocese. That means I work with stewardship commissions, pastoral councils, and sometimes finance councils and short and long-term stewardship planning. It does not mean that my job is to help parishes raise more money. My job is to help our parishes and their leadership groups understand the broader scope of stewardship and how that builds community and engagement. And once we have community and engagement in our parishes, the rest follows. Let's begin this morning, as we should all things, when we're dealing with our faith, and that's in prayer. You have this prayer in your folder, so feel free to use the little card that's in there, or you can pray with me from the screen. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Together we pray.
Lord, give us the eyes of Jesus to truly see our neighbors and the strangers we meet. Teach us what it means to be part of a community and to love the stranger as we love ourselves. Teach us to be authentically welcoming, purposely attentive, and intentionally kind. Forgive us for our self-centeredness, for our silence, and for our indifference. Help us to follow his example of service to friend and stranger alike. We ask this through Christ our Lord. Amen.
Thank you. Just a little bit of housekeeping before we get started. Feel free at any time if you need to get up and get more coffee, more water, another snack. We're not going to be that formal. There are going to be two about 15 or 20 minute periods this morning where you're going to be doing some small group conversation. So we're going to kind of consider those our breaks. And my goal is to have us conclude between 10:30 and 10:45. I want to get you out of here a little bit early. It is a Saturday morning. But I do so thank you for being with me. For those of you not familiar with the parish, there's a ladies' room back here, and they're down the hall this way, I'm told, as well. Once again, if you have to get up, and feel free to do so. So this morning, we're going to be talking about hospitality. And it's not just greeting, and it's not just Donut Sunday. We're going to talk about internal hospitality as well. But when I did this presentation originally, I did a lot of research on definitions of hospitality, and one quote really caught my eye. And it's a quote by Father William Bausch, who's a pastor in New Jersey. And he said, "There are certain things a parish can do that make statements or give off vibrations that repel or attract. There is, in a word, such a thing as a theology of place, the indicators of life, community, and spirituality." And that theology of place really caught my eye. And if we're talking about theology of place, we want our parishes to be places not just where newcomers feel welcome when they come in the door, but where the parishioners who have been here for a while find a sense of community and a sense of hospitality and a sense of being a part of something important. So that's what we're talking about when we're talking about hospitality. In case you can't read the little caption there, it says, "The whole church watched with nervous anticipation as the visitors sat where the Martins had sat." We all know in many of our parishes, we have a greeter ministry. We have ushers. We also have people who arrive 5 minutes late and give that look to somebody who's sitting in their pew. And it's not because we're unwelcoming, it's just because we're creatures of habit. And we aren't necessarily intentional in our efforts for welcoming. We talk about pew ownership and we joke about it, but it's a real thing in our parishes that we need to be aware of. So this morning's agenda, we're going to talk a little bit about hospitality in the Sunday Mass, best practices for welcoming new parishioners, best practices for ministry training. Let me say this. We're not going to be doing specific ministry training this morning as in you're a greeter at St. Peter Claver and I'm going to show you where the defibrillator is. Of course not. What we're going to be talking about is best practices that should be in usher training, in greeter training, and there should be training. We'll talk about that. Best practices for that training. Planting the seat exercises are those 2 moments I told you where you're going to be doing some small group discussion and conversation. We'll have time for, we'll talk about internal hospitality. I see I'm missing a quotation mark there. And there will be time at the end of the morning for questions. As I said, I want to respect your time, but I am happy to be here and answer as many questions as you might have. So, the natural sense of belonging, the huge groups of people that we knew in our parishes when I was young, that kind of community doesn't necessarily exist anymore. The people I grew up with in my parish, which at that time would have been St. Adalbert's on the south side of Milwaukee, a very Polish parish, had been living in that neighborhood for 50 years. Everybody knew everybody. That's not the world we live in now. So if we look at the Councils and Commissions Manual, which if you're on the Pastoral Council, or one of the commissions you're familiar with, but the Council and Commissions Manual from the Archdiocese says, no area of mission needs to be developed more than the building of community. So many parishes in the Archdiocese of Milwaukee were founded for a specific immigrant population. In addition to their faith, these people were bonded by their culture and family ties. These bonds no longer guarantee that people will come to your church, continue to practice their faith. Parishes must be more intentional about welcoming. Parishes must be characterized by hospitality as well as promote and develop a sense of belonging. You know, the days of folks moving into a neighborhood and the Catholic Church every 2 blocks they went to the one they could walk to in 5 minutes, those days again don't exist. So in order for us to remain and become even more vibrant communities, we need to be intentional about what we're doing. So, Sunday Mass is often the first time a new person will encounter your parish. And this could be someone who's just moved in and is looking for a Catholic church, someone who hasn't been at Mass for a long, long time but feels as though they'd like to come back, someone who's completely unchurched and for whatever reason is drawn to Mass. There are all kinds of reasons newcomers are coming into your parish. And it's an important first experience. But our liturgy is also the source and summit of who we are as Catholics. So making that liturgy a rich experience is really, really important. And let me just step aside a little bit from hospitality and mention one thing about the Mass for those of us who have been going for a very, very long time. I was at St. John Vianney in Brookfield and St. Leonard in Muskego on different topics, but both times this came up. And so I will mention it this morning, and I include myself in this. We have to remember when we go to Mass that we also get out of it what we bring to it. How many times have we been in church going, oh, for heaven's sakes, we're singing verse 4. Really? Are we singing verse 4? Okay, Packers kick off at noon. Father, let's move this along. Think about this. You would never go visit your parents and walk into the house and say, Mom, I need dinner on the table in 15 minutes. I have places to be. I have things to do. Let's move this along. Dad, you know I've heard that story. Great thing. You would never do that. You would never do that. Sometimes we let the world stay in our mind and dictate where we need to be instead of embracing the wonderful gift that our liturgy is. So it's important for us as Catholics to just remember and give ourselves permission to embrace that really exciting gift. Off the topic, I know, but I wanted to share that with you. I will tell you, when we look at welcoming into a liturgy, it takes more than a couple of posters and the occasional donut sundae to have a really welcoming parish. So many, many, many parishes have usher ministries, greeter ministries, but you can still walk into those parishes and not necessarily feel welcome. There was a former superintendent of schools for the Archdiocese. He moved to Washington, D.C., so he's no longer with us. But he moved from Minneapolis to Milwaukee to take that position. He bought a house on the east side of Milwaukee. If you're familiar with the east side at all, there is a parish any direction 6 or 8 blocks. He told me that he joined the 4th parish he visited because someone who was not a greeter or an usher extended a hand and introduced themselves. He said, I wanted to be welcomed by somebody who didn't have the job that week. So we should remember it's not just the job of our greeters and ushers to say hello to people when they're coming into church. So how many of you sing at most parishes the song All Are Welcome? Is that a familiar song? We sing it a lot, right? It's important to know that all means all, and that's not always the case. Once again, as I said, you've got folks who've never been to a Catholic Mass. My son, when he and his bride decided to get married, his best man was his best friend, and the young man professes to be an atheist. But he came and traveled here and went to Mass with us just to experience it. He had never been in a church, much less a Catholic church, to the point where he said, why are people curtsying when they come in? And it was like, I mean, that's genuine. But again, people who have no idea what they're experiencing. And all really does mean all. If we've got somebody coming in off their Harley, or somebody coming in that's got cerebral palsy or something else, sometimes as human beings that we're not all that comfortable. Sometimes it's just fine, but it's just important to remember that all does indeed mean all. There was a wonderful publication called A Vision for the Future Evangelization in the Sunday Mass that was done for the Synod. I have some hard copies of that this morning if you would like it. Over 6,000 of these have been distributed to pastoral councils, liturgy committees, etc. And it talks about a whole lot of resources for teaching about the Mass. There is a lot I'm sure each of us could still learn. And it offers some very specific suggestions. We're reprinting it, so I didn't have enough to put one in every one of your packets today. But I have a bunch of copies, and you can also get it online. So I recommend this if you have a chance to read through it. Now, one of the first things that we should talk about when we're looking at welcoming overall, moving away from the liturgy right now, is our physical plan. It is very important that people know how to get where they need to go. Most of us who are active in our parishes could navigate our campuses blindfolded. We know every nook and cranny. We know where we're going. If you're going to a new parish, that's not always the case. I can tell you when traveling to a lot of parishes, I always ask which door I should come in. Some parishes say go to door 13 on the north side. Other people say, well, it's kind of one that faces the gas station and there's not much light there, but if you park around the corner, okay? So it's very important that we help folks navigate our space. So do we provide in our parishes clearly marked exit and entrances? I will mention many of our parishes now have one-way patterns in their parking lots. We have one parish who has an awful lot of fender benders because it's not marked. And the regular parishioners know which way to go, and of course everybody's pretty much in a hurry at the end of Mass. So, do we do these things? Do we have convenient and signed handicap and guest parking? Many parishes are now setting aside a few spots after their handicap spot for guests. Just another sign that people are welcome. Well-lit and well-maintained parking lots. I know from the proxy process, Father will probably smile, we know how our parking lots are in the Archdiocese. It's not just a matter, though, of the paving and all of that, it's a matter of the lighting. And in some cases, it's a matter of security. Father did ask me to mention, since security just came out of my mouth here, that at a different time, there'll be a different meeting talking about specific security procedures. But in the world we live in, many parishes are putting security cameras in their parking lots. Do we have handicapped access to the worship space, restrooms, and the gathering space? Including our ambo. We have parishes now that are putting ramps in so that parishioners, we have one lady who had always been a lector and loved it, and developed a condition where she was now in a wheelchair and just decried the fact she could no longer lecture. They put a ramp in so she could. I mean, we all have those steps you have to go up, so are we thinking in the broader term? Clean, inviting restrooms, you would think that's common sense. A lot of what I'm going to say tonight, this morning, is, this is common sense. You would be surprised how often common sense is not employed. Or, somebody was supposed to do something who didn't. Point is, clean and inviting restrooms, of course, are important. And then clearly exits and entrances from the buildings. When we have, and I'll be talking about this with the ushers and greeters, let's just say there's a pancake breakfast in the school after Mass. Is it clear for someone who's not familiar with the parish how to get into the school from the church? Not always. So once again, welcome to our church, although you're sitting in our family pew. This is so, so important. And we also know that first impressions are lasting impressions. If you go somewhere and you are feeling not only not welcomed but unwelcome, you're probably not going to go back. So it's important that we, as folks who are always at Mass, kind of break out of our habits if we can. All of us have our Mass, whether it's the 5 o'clock on Saturday, the 8:30, the 10, whatever. We have our Mass that we normally go to. And we have our people that we normally sit with. And we have our folks that we stop and chat with in the vestibule after Mass, in the gathering space. When I did this for our staff folks at our parishes, I challenged those of the staff members at their own parishes. I said, when you leave Mass on Sunday, you want to say a quick hi to the people you always talk to, but look for someone you don't know and say hello to them. We have people in our parishes that we have seen every single Sunday for how long, but never spoken to them. Perhaps no one has spoken to them. And we can't build community if we all stay in our insular little groups. So I challenge you tonight when you go to Mass, or on Sunday morning when you go, or Sunday evening, if you have Sunday evening Masses out here, to look for somebody who may very well be attending Mass on their own by themselves and say hi. Introduce yourself. Let them know you're glad they're here. So when we say all are welcome, are we really ready for visitors? Do we extend a hand and introduce ourselves when we're not greeters? That's the story that I told you about our superintendent. Because folks will come in, be greeted, come into the church, kind of stand there and figure out where to go, and nobody says another word to them after that. Not a good thing. Do we extend a hand to someone we don't know at the sign of peace? Once again, we usually sit where we sit, as the people around us do. Do we ever walk across the aisle to extend a hand? Do we really welcome folks? Do we make eye contact and smile? Do we train our greeters to offer help and information as needed? I'm going to go into that a little more deeply. People say, how hard can it be to greet? You stand there, you say hello, it's good. There's a lot more to it than that. So do we have training for our greeters? Do we move into the pew to make room, or do people have to climb over us? That's one of my favorites. We sit on the end, we like the ends. Do we help those in need locate handicap seating? Again, at my own parish, St. Mary's in Menominee Falls, we've got one of those T-shaped churches, so people come in most often from the parking lot, which is by the altar. when they come in, we have a ramp, etc., but I have seen folks come in with someone in a wheelchair and kind of stand there because it's not obvious where the handicap seating is, and they just kind of look woefully around until finally someone feels guilty enough to get up and show them where the handicap seating is. Again, part of the ushers training normally, but if the ushers are busy, it's good for all of us to feel free to stand up, introduce ourselves, and help out. Do we encourage the presence of small children at Mass? I'm going to talk a little bit more about this. Do we take time to talk to someone we don't know? And do we encourage parishioners on a regular basis to bring a guest to Mass? It's interesting how some parishes will actually at some points have that as a challenge, bring a friend to Mass. I was just at the cathedral doing some lay witness training, and there was a couple there, and the wife talked about how she had been active at the cathedral for a long time, but her husband didn't go to church, but that's okay. I mean, he was a good man, he didn't go to church, he never really had or whatever. One Sunday she said to him, and he was there to verify this, she said, why don't you come to Mass with me? And he said, well, I was waiting for you to ask. For 10 years he was waiting for her to ask. He thought that was her thing, and he was letting her have her thing. So, sometimes, all you need to do is ask. Now, going back to children, a special word about families with children. I won't read you this quote. It's in your folders in the PowerPoint. But the reality is, if we do not welcome our children into church when they are young, why do we think they're going to stay involved when they're older? And sometimes it is difficult to deal with our families with small children if we don't recognize that we have a very important responsibility in that regard. So our challenge is to encourage young families to worship with their children, to make that a good experience, and then encourage our parishioners to welcome young kids, even those whose behavior isn't perfect. Now, I'm not talking about the 2-year-old that's having the tantrum from heaven and screaming to high heaven. Of course, our parents have a responsibility in that regard. But I can tell you that I have had stories related to me of folks who came to church with their children. I've got somebody at work who, as we speak, is probably having baby number 4. Goes to her parish, all of her kids are under 5. And she will occasionally get that look just for bringing those children into the pew. Now, any of us who have children have known there are just some days when that little guy's going to kick that pew no matter how often we tell him not to, so we have to keep telling him not to. But it is so important for our young families to feel that their children are welcome. That their children are welcome. So it's a balance between how do we make that happen so that worship is not interrupted for everyone else, but still welcome those families with children. So, we should of course invite our young families to come to Mass. Many parishes are providing busy bags. Is anybody familiar with this? Where you have a little post with what, and that's a wonderful thing. Obviously provide a quiet space for families who need it, but encourage them to be seated in the assembly. We have had parishes that I had one parish that had a sign that said, if you have children under 10, sit in the crying room. Now, children under 10, frankly, if you can't behave by the time you're 4 or 5, you have a problem, but that's me. The point is, we don't want to say, you belong in the crying room, you have children. No, you belong with the assembly. Offer liturgy of the word for children as often as possible. This varies parish by parish. Some parishes don't have this at all. Others who have an active Christian formation program do offer it. I was at a presentation from a parish in Texas that began offering liturgy of the word for children on Christmas and Easter. And I said, really? And she said, absolutely. When do we have the most children in our church? When the people who don't come, bring them on Christmas and Easter. So it was obviously a change for their staff. Their pastor agreed, but she said, when do we have the most children? Why would we not offer this when we have the most children? And those children have a wonderful experience. And the parents learn about liturgy of the word. And this was so cool, Mom, can I go back? So I'm not saying every parish should do that. I just found that fascinating. Smile at parents and tell them and their children how glad you are to see them. This is the exact opposite of giving that look. Susan McNeil, some of you may be familiar with her. She is director of the Office for Lay Ministry at the Archdiocese. She talks about a time when she was in church with her son, and he was quite young, and he was just not being a good boy, and she tried her best, and she kept him quiet, but she shushed him a lot. She was practically in tears at the end of the Mass because she felt she was interrupting other people's experience. And at the sign of peace, the woman in front of her turned around and extended a hand and said, I know what that's like, you're doing a great job. So she said she went to communion with a little smile in her heart because she felt so much better. That's the provide encouragement, even when the children are less than well behaved. And communicate regularly with the congregation that small children are a joy. Again, this is not the baby that's constantly crying and we can't hear the homily, etc. If you have the occasional joyful baby singing with everybody else, that is a wonderful, wonderful and blessed thing. So, a word now about ministry training. Let me first say this. There should be ministry training, and there isn't always. So when we have greeters and ushers and other hospitality ministers, like I said, folks think I could sign up to be a greeter. How hard is that? I'll stand at the door, I'll welcome people. You know, if we hand out bulletins before Mass, which some parishes do, I can do that, and it's not difficult. But every parish should have procedures and training written down, and every new usher or greeter should be trained and walked through that material by someone experienced in the ministry. This kind of is bleeding into when I talk about internal hospitality. But imagine being a greeter or an usher on your very first assignment, not having had any training, and arriving and not being sure of what to do. And that happens. It's not a comfortable thing. And people can become very discouraged. So it's important that there is indeed training, and it does not have to be hours, weeks, and days. But you never want a new usher or greeter to start unless they have either shadowed one or they've had 20 minutes of walkthrough on here's what you're responsible for and the important things you need to know. So when we talk about hospitality ministry training, and again, these are best practices overall for every parish. They're not specific to any, but they should be employed overall. Greeters should know where the handicapped accessible entrance is. Again, sounds simple, not always. Some people will, I have occasion again heard where people will say, do you have a handicapped access? And the greeter will say, I don't know. We need to know. To know where the restrooms are and if a key is needed. If a parish keeps their restrooms locked, and some do, we need to be able to have that information. Again, to offer those busy beds, to be aware of any events. And by that, I say, a greeter comes in, so glad to see you at 10:30 Mass. Welcome. If you have a chance, we're having a pancake breakfast this morning. We'd like you to stay. Greeter's not going to say that if they're not aware of what's going on. Be familiar with the emergency exits and an evacuation procedure. Every parish should have an evacuation procedure. St. Alphonsus in Greendale on the third Sunday of Advent, somebody dropped a candle and the wreath went up like the Christmas tree. Giant flames. How do we get people out of the church? We need to know. Know the location of emergency medical devices. If you have a defibrillator, many parishes do. That's primarily the piece I'm talking about. Know where it is. Know where it is. And probably how to use it. Your ushers certainly know how to use it, but a greeter or an usher should know if you have any kind of emergency medical equipment, a first aid kit. Somebody cuts themselves. Do we have any Band-Aids? Don't know. Again, where is that equipment? How do we access it? And know who the ushers are. You might laugh. Of course they know who the ushers are. Again, we have folks in our parishes who have never spoken to the person they see. They don't really kind of know their name. They don't know where they're located. And if the ushers are going to be the lead on a lot of the emergency procedures and safety things, the greeters need to know who the ushers are that Sunday. Or Saturday evening, or whatever. So everything that goes for the greeters applies to our ushers as well. But the ushers should know the other ushers serving with them. Again, you may laugh. My husband, years ago, was captain of the 5 o'clock usher team on a Saturday evening. He had the list of names. He had no idea who these people were, because they were all new. They had no idea where to pick up their badges. We finally figured it out, but the ushers should know who the ushers are. To be trained to operate any medical devices. If you have a defibrillator or anything else in your parish, your ushers certainly, and probably your greeters, should be trained on how to use it. Practice the evacuation procedure. Not just know what to do if there's a fire, but on occasion, once a year, to practice it so that we are prepared if something happens. And be trained on the parish-specific emergency procedures and be aware of how to guide 911 services to the correct church entrance. And this is important. If you've got a lot of doors, you don't want an ambulance pulling up. I'll give you St. Mary's again. The address of the church is on, I don't even know what the street is, I think it's Water Street. And there's 25, 35 stairs to get in that door. The parking lot has the ramp and the wide door. So if someone's calling 911 and that's usually one of your ushers, they need to be able to guide them and tell them where to come. Again, part of your safety procedure. So, the question is then, are we ready? Are we ready to have visitors in our parishes? If you'll open your folders, if they're not already open, you should find a sheet in there, the top one, the orange one, that says, are we ready for a visitor? I'd like you to take that out, read through the questions on your own, and rank things. And you'll notice the instructions at the top. And if I'm correct, and I'm going to look over this lady's shoulder to make sure I am correct. Yes, a 1 means that the activity or whatever you see there is highly unlikely to happen in your parish. A 5 means, oh, it's very likely. We do this all the time. 2, 3, and 4 are degrees of that. And then after you've filled out your sheet, I'd like you to take 15 minutes or so to talk about it in your groups. This isn't about right or wrong, what we have and don't have. This is just food for thought. So if you would, feel free to fill out the sheets, have your conversation. Don't forget there are lovely refreshments here, coffee and what have you. And I'll be back with you in about 15 or 20 minutes. If I have your attention, okay then. It sounds like you're having some wonderful conversations, and I hope that these conversations continue. You'll have another opportunity this morning with another exercise similar to this one. I'm hoping that you think about taking these exercises to your councils and your commission members. They can even be turned into food for thought in little bits and pieces for the bulletin to help spread some of this intentional hospitality. My favorite piece of scripture is from Psalms. Be still and know that I am God. 21st century Catholics, particularly American Catholics, are not still. We are running from one thing to the next to the next. We are always very busy. The fact that you're dedicating this time to be here in service of your parishes is wonderful. But it's important for us to remember that we need to constantly reinforce and share our message. So I hope you enjoyed that conversation. Sure sounded lively. And you'll have another opportunity in just a few minutes. So, when we talk about the parish being ready for visitors, corporately now, not as individuals, corporately, a parish needs a well-defined welcoming process, an informative new parishioner information packet, and creative ideas that are revised every year. And by that, what I mean is, what is the process when somebody walks into the parish office to register? Many parishes don't have a process. They just have somebody there who will maybe give them a card to fill out and maybe hand them a packet. But there should be roles for staff, roles for volunteers, and roles for your council and committee members. I'm going to be talking about mentor ministry in a minute. In some parishes now, the council members, on a rotation, like twice a month, get a list of 2 or 3 families, and there are more of the council members involved at one time, depending on the number of new registrants. And they'll call and say, hi, I'm Barb Vite. I'm the chairperson of the Pastoral Council, and I just wanted to call and welcome you to our parish. That's what I mean by roles for your parish leaders. We need to have an informative and engaging new parishioner information packet. Most parishes have something. But oftentimes it's a folder that might have a ministry guide, or a sign-up sheet for volunteering. It'll certainly have information on the envelopes. And probably a mass schedule and a few other things. It's important that those packets inspire people so that when they open it, they say, this looks like a wonderful parish. We don't just hand our newcomers, here's where you sign up to volunteer for us. Here's how you give your money to us. Thanks very much. You're on our roster now. But we need to strike a balance between giving folks the right information, inspiring information, and drowning them in a sea of paper. Because we can tip that the other way as well. So when we're talking about new parishioner information packets, I want to make sure that comes up farther, and I don't know that it does. We'll find out. We'll come back to it. And then creative ideas. What kind of orientation events do we have? Besides Donut Sunday, every quarter, maybe. And I'll talk about some ideas for those. 1 year additional touches. Again, Pastoral Council, perhaps. Stewardship Commission, perhaps. Depends on the parish. You've been with us for a year. We're so glad. How's it going? We're so happy to have you. So, indeed, the registration process. There are some things we can do that are traditional and others not. I have here a welcoming kiosk and a gathering space. If your gathering space allows, this is a great idea, under certain circumstances. Some folks have said, I've been in Northbrook, they have a giant one of these, this is a really Protestant idea, we don't do that. Here's the thing. When do most new people come? To Mass. So if you have room, and not all churches have room, I know this, it's a great idea to have a welcoming kiosk with designated information. Designated information, this does not mean every committee, every event, every fundraiser has a flyer on that table. This is more that inspiring newcomer information, and that it's staffed by volunteers after every Mass. And by staffed, I'm saying somebody standing at a table if anybody has any questions, like what time can I come to the parish office to register? I had a business manager at a parish happen to overhear, and thank goodness she was there, because she jumped in, but there was a young family that came out of Mass, walked up to another family and said, you know, we really enjoyed Mass. We'd like to register. You know, is that at the parish office? And the person said, I don't really know, you can probably call on Monday, somebody can figure it out. Business manager swooped in and said, hi, can I help you? Many parishes, and if there's parish staff member here, know that I'm not advocating this, so please don't throw anything. Many parishes are having their office staff, they're working the hours so that office staff is available during Mass. Again, if you make a business analogy, when do your people come? On Sunday. So I'm not saying parish offices should be open, I'm saying some parishes are being creative in that way. Here we are. When we talk about in-office registrations, it's important that our front desk people are friendly and prepared. And I'll show you what I mean by prepared. That staff personally conduct a registration interview. Again, if all we do when a new person comes in the door is have them sign up, tell them what we need them to do and send them on their way, that's not very welcoming. So when we're talking about a registration interview, we sit down if we can. Now, if you have a stewardship director, that person can do this. Some business managers do this. Others, this person at the front desk or volunteers at the front desk are trained to do this. We're so glad you came. Do you have time to sit down and chat for 10 minutes? Oh, let me fill out the information with you. Oh, I see you have young children. Would you like information on our school? I see that as you're filling out, you know, we have a really good women's group here, if it's a single woman. How do you take the time, the next point, care enough to take the time to welcome them to your parish, not add them to our roster of people who get envelopes. So if we have a process for that, it's important to do. To offer a campus tour. Again, and we don't have a stewardship director up here right now, but stewardship directors in parish will often say, do you have a time? Because I'd be happy to walk you around our campus to show you who we are as a parish. A follow-up phone call. Again, this can be part of the mentor ministry we'll talk about. And a welcome letter from the pastor. Some pastors, and this is a standard letter, that some pastors send that out just as a letter from the pastor. Others include that right in the new parishioner's welcome packet. That's a real easy way to do it. But a letter from the pastor saying, we're so glad you have joined us. And here's that new member packet I talked about. That letter of welcome. A letter of welcome from the school principal or the DRE if the packet's going to a family with children. An overview of mission statements. Information about faith-building groups, fellowship events. Your ministry catalog, or volunteer opportunities list. Let me step aside for a moment. One of the things we've traditionally done as Catholics is have a sign-up sheet for our ministries. Sometimes it's just a single sheet with the ministry name. People today want to know what they're being asked to do. So if I sign up to be a lector, is that every Sunday? At the same Mass? Is that once a month? Too many questions, I'll just not sign up. Ministry guides are something we need to think about. When I say information about groups for singles, teens, young mothers, etc., your devotional information, sometimes a little gift, and a way for the newcomer to share any other needs that they have. We talk about customizing new member packets. If you have a process when someone comes in and the people at your front desk are trained, and there are 5 different components. There's the traditional stuff that's in the packet, Mass times, etc., etc. But that volunteer is trained that if a family comes in and they have children, you will reach into the pile that is always kept in this place and put the school information in. If it's someone who's joining as a young adult single, and we have more and more of that, you will reach over here and grab the Theology on Tap info or whatever it is, so that they know how to customize those packets. Sounds like a lot of work, sounds like a lot of detail, If we are not willing to invest the time to make that first experience a really good one, why do we think these new parishioners are gonna be all excited about joining a ministry or getting really engaged in the parish? Orientation events. This is an idea from Saint Veronica. And Father, it's Saint Veronica, so when I go, just, no. This is something where the last, it's held after the last Mass on Sunday. I think they do it once a month, and there's lunch with the pastor for the new families. And then the pastor takes them around and tour the campus, history and whatever. Not all of our pastors, particularly those serving multiple parishes, can do this. But it is one idea. An easier idea is a get-to-know-us dinner, where there's a simple meal, staff members give an overview of their ministry. The stewardship committee is present to talk about the ministries, not to get people to sign up, but to show what the parish offers for families and individuals. And pastoral council members are there to greet people. Parishes who do this usually do it twice a year. Not like you do it all the time, but it's a good idea. Something else that is a very, very easy thing once it's set up is a mentor ministry. And if you think about it, even if that very first registration experience is great, somebody customized their packet, folks were given a campus tour, that was great. Now they're on their own, forever and always. And they're still trying to navigate the parish and what's offered. So a mentor ministry, ideally a parish will recruit from all demographics. So there'll be some families with school kids, there will be some senior couples, there will be a single or two, so that you can kind of match the mentor with the new person. That person would call the new family within 2 weeks, and that mentor would have had some training on listening and conversation skills, and connect at multiple points through the year. The point is that I would, for instance, be able to call and say, hi, I'm Barb Vite. I'm gonna be my husband John and I are gonna be your mentor couple here at St. Mary's. We're so glad to have you. We normally go to the 5 o'clock Saturday Mass, but if you'd like somebody to go with you the first couple times to introduce you to folks, let us know when you're going and we'll be happy to go with you. A couple of months later, St. Mary's is having their Feastival, which is their equivalent of a festival. You know, call, hey, we hope you can come. Just those little touches so that they have someone to help walk them through. If the new person's not interested in that, they'll tell you, but they'll tell you politely. Most people are, oh great, and I will tell you many, many friendships developed between mentor families and the newcomers. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is how you build community. So, let's be creative when we're looking at ideas. Look for the yellow roses. This is again something that was done at St. Mary's. This Feastival that they have is a weekend in October, and it's an all-you-can-eat buffet dinner held in the gym. It replaces what was 35 years ago their parish festival. So one year, the Stewardship Commission came up with the idea of sending all of the new families who had registered that year free tickets to the Feastival. It cost them, I want to say there were probably 40 families. The point is, it didn't cost them much. This is a dinner. They were free tickets. They hoped people would come. But the key was, they told the folks who were at the ticket-taking table, when you see this orange ticket, give someone from that group, if it's a group or an individual, give them a yellow rose. They had a big bucket of yellow roses. Pastoral council, finance council, staff and commissions were all, because everybody comes to this dinner and people usually come all 3 times, you know. If you see somebody with a yellow rose, go up and introduce yourself. They're new. And it worked beautifully. And so people came because it was free and enjoyed it because they were welcomed as newcomers. And the food is also fabulous. Opportunities to be creative with events. Lots of parishes have trivia nights. Game night teams. Something interesting that I'm only aware of because of my daughter-in-law. My son and daughter-in-law live in San Jose, California. They are 26 years old. They are entirely into board games. I find out that my daughter-in-law belongs to a board game club, and I'm talking board games, not electronic, board games, strategy games, games with Chinese tiles I couldn't even imagine. And I understand in checking on this, our 20-somethings are into board games. Who would have thought? I'm not talking Monopoly, but board games. So if there's a club of 26-year-olds in San Jose, California doing board games, and we want to attract young people, when we advertise a game night, this isn't just Candyland for families. This is a Zool for our 20-year-olds too, if we do it well. Christmas plays, school concerts, special invitation and seating. Again, we should be inviting all of our newcomers to our school Christmas play, even if they don't have kids in school. How do we show them the richness of what we do as parishes? Again, invitations to visit a group. Newcomer festival packages. People have done this. One parish has a family fun festival in January, and it's jumping castles, and it's kids games, and it's a huge fundraiser for the school. They, in their registration packets, because most people, unless you have somebody in grade school, you would not want to be at this event from a noise standpoint, speaking from experience. But they invite everybody to come who has registered that year for free. They don't need to buy the food tickets, they don't need to buy the drink tickets. The idea is, how can we creatively engage people? So none of these are the be-all and end-all, but they are just great ideas. If you have a card, I'm sure you've all been to parishes where they have a card in the pew that asks you to leave your contact information. If you've never seen that, many parishes, particularly our Protestant brothers and sisters, have a little card in the pew that just says, let us know you were here and blah, blah, blah. One parish that does that has this, and this is just a little postcard that says thank you, and the print on the bottom, which may be difficult to read, says, as we celebrate the Lord's presence, we also give thanks for your presence among us. We invite you to return soon. And they just mail those out to anybody who left a card in the pew. So, when we talk about visitors, do we provide those cards in the vestibule? Do we provide a worship aid to help those new to our tradition or parish habits? Let me explain. Have you ever gone to a parish that stands for the consecration when you kneel? They're out there. Have you ever been to a wedding or a funeral where the pews have a lot of people in them who haven't been in church in a real long time, or who aren't Catholic and don't know when to stand and don't know when to sit and don't know, and are looking around trying to be? So in many parishes now, if there's a worship aid for a funeral or a worship aid for something special, a little please kneel, please sit. It's not for us, we know. But if somebody's new and they don't, they're uncomfortable. Oh, should I be standing? Oh, should I sit? What should I do? That's a thought. To ask visitors and newly registered parishioners to stand for a blessing at Mass. I know quite a few parishes who will say, do we have any visitors with us today? If you're visiting, would you please stand? We'd love to offer you a special blessing. Conduct customer service training for our frontline staff and our frontline volunteers. This is really important. And we think customer service training, that's a business thing. You do not want to walk into a parish office to register and have somebody behind the desk who doesn't understand we need to be cheerful and friendly, and it happens. It happens. And imagine a phone call, hi, I would like to, I think I'd like to join your parish. Can I get some information on registration? I want to phone now. Because I'd like to get my baby baptized. That can go one of two ways. Are you Catholic? Are you a parishioner here? Or, I'm so happy for you, can I get some basic information? It makes a huge difference, because there are young families who will hear, are you Catholic? Are you a parishioner here? Well, no, I'm not, never mind, I didn't mean to bother you, and are gonna call the next parish. But if we don't train our volunteers, this is what you say, and how you say it, it can go very, very wrong. And train our commission and hospitality members. That's where I talked about ushers, greeters. We need actual training, not just, you'll figure it out. Somebody will be there to tell you. So, again, ideas on what to do to help us with visitors. So, we're now saying we are ready. We have got our systems in place. We are all excited. Maybe we are, maybe we're not. In your folders, there is a lavender sheet of paper that says how glad we are that you are here. This is the same exercise as the last. You may see some of the same questions, but many are different. Same thing about ranking. So once again, if you would take the next 15 minutes or so to fill those out and have some conversation, hopefully the conversation will be as lively as the last. I'll be back with you right about 10:30.
I mean, a lot of people didn't even bother to come down. But then, you know, that's what I do. Yes, so we sit down, so you get the feel. You don't have to stand.
If I could have your attention, again, I hope that was an enjoyable exercise. And these are the kinds of things that when we put a hospitality commission, committee, ministry together, whether it's under a stewardship commission or not, these are the kinds of conversations that we have. I know when we talk about signage and some of those other things, a lot of that depends on building and grounds and parish budget. The reality is that we, however, need to be intentional. We have, as Catholics, kind of tended to think we're here, people will come and we'll smile at them and shake their hand when they come in the door and we'll be great. That is not the case. So when we're looking at things, we need to look at them with the eyes of someone who is seeing it for the first time. Again, we know our parishes and our people so well. Imagine if you had never met anyone before or seen the place before. So now, internal hospitality, not just for visitors. This is just a note. I know a gentleman, this is not him, but actually because he has tattoos, who comes to church every week in his biker gear with 2 full sleeve tattoos. If you know what that is, it's tattooed all the way up. In the summer you know that, in the winter you don't. And he actually has neck tattoos as well. He is a fierce looking human being. Nobody ever talks to him. He is the gentlest, kindest soul. But people go, okay, think about this, the gentleman came to church, so we're probably good. I don't know if you can tell in the light, but this young man has a couple of piercings or whatever. We watch our children come to church, and aren't they adorable? And look at the first communion, look at them. Aren't they beautiful? Look at confirmation, aren't they great? 2 years later, that young man comes up from high school to church, or from, not if he goes to Marquette, but if he comes from a public high school or a college, and comes to church with purple hair and piercings, what is that? That is that young person. That is that same person we welcome. It's just something we as humans need to realize does not matter. All means all. Just a gentle reminder there. Now, I'm going to talk about hospitality for folks who are not yet on a committee, not yet on a commission. They're parishioners. They've been here a while. We want more people involved in our ministries, right? Because we have all the same people doing all the same things all the time. So how do we make that happen? Now, there are things like personal invitation and A quick response, we Catholics are guilty of things like letting somebody sign up for something and then never calling them again. It's just a thing. Without a process, that happens. To have clear recruitment tools and all of those things, and that's a conversation for another day that falls under something called calling workers into the vineyard. That's management. Today I'm going to talk about the don'ts. Let's just say we've got somebody who's excited to join a committee or commission. Again, none of the things I'm about to share with you are intentional. We don't want to be mean. We don't want to be non-inclusive. But we are human, and we've been working in our ministries for a long time, and we sometimes forget. So these are the don'ts of welcoming new committee and commission members. First one says, don't let new members, sit on the fringes. Here's what that means. I'm excited, I'm gonna join the Human Concerns Committee. I come to the meeting. 10 people at a table, I find a chair and I sit down. Those 10 people know each other very well. They've been working together a lot. They know each other's kids. They know each other's work. They're just chatting away. And there I sit. Someone needs to say, hi, welcome. We just sometimes don't think about that. We don't think about it. Don't expect the new member to know all about your committee or ministry. If you've got somebody new at the table, and this is the meeting of the Human Concerns Committee, I see you're new. You know, some of the things we do, we work with St. Ben's, we work with this, we work with that. Don't just jump into the business of the reporting agenda. Help them understand your ministry. Don't dismiss previous experience, and don't discuss new things offhand, and beware of language that kills enthusiasm. These are all the same things. Imagine someone who's finally decided to join a commission, comes to the committee, is listening, and decides to come up with, you know, here's an idea. I'll give you an example, true example from a parish. And it was indeed Human Concerns Committee. And the parish had a very active St. Ben's meal program ministry. If you're familiar with St. Ben's in Milwaukee, it is a shelter meal program. And many of the parishes have teams that work with the folks at St. Ben's to go and bring and serve a meal. That's basically it in a nutshell. And that parish had a very strong St. Ben's team. New person on their Human Concerns Commission says, you know, I was so excited to see that you have an active St. Ben's ministry. At my former parish, I headed that ministry. I, as a school mom, this was a younger woman, she said, you know, I would be willing to recruit people and get a second team together. We could then, as St. X, serve twice. The head of the St. Ben's ministry happened to be at the table, and she said, you know, we're good. Thanks, but we've got this.
She didn't come to another meeting, did she?
She did not. So the idea, now, not every new idea is a good one, not every new idea needs to be embraced, but so often new folks, even if they're from our parish, excuse me, are going to say, well, how about this? And someone is going to answer them, oh, you know, we tried that. That's not gonna work here. Let's move on. We have to be open to new ideas.
And to listen to young people too.
And to listen to young people.
A lot of the committees
And don't give a new member only the grunt work. Here's what I mean by that. And this is a school example. I know, are you familiar with school book fairs?
Yeah.
Okay. So there's always a committee of moms that, you know, volunteers and does the book fair. Brand new mom, again, no training, not knowing what to do, showed up for her shift. And, you know, went to the two ladies at the register area and said, here I am. I'm all set, what should I do? Well, you know, Mary and I have got the register, and Sue and Pam are working with the teachers and the kids, and Sue's over here, you know, doing the reading corner. Here's Reg, why don't you dust the books? Needless to say, that didn't go well either. But again, if we know we have new people coming, if we know we have people coming and they're new, that doesn't mean they get the grunt work, because we don't want to do it. Not saying that's always the way it goes, but again, to be aware. And don't forget to be grateful. Thanks so much for coming to our meeting tonight, even if that person never uttered a word. It's great to see you. Always remember to be grateful. So, that is primarily my presentation for you this morning. I would just ask that each of us be aware and each of us look at new ways. The Pope has asked us to look at evangelization through new eyes, to look at stewardship through new eyes. This whole welcoming and engagement piece, we as Catholic parishes and as individual Catholics don't become more aware and intentional of what we're doing, we are Albert Einstein, doing exactly what we've done, exactly the same way, and expecting a different result. So hopefully this was helpful. I'm going to open the floor now. Some folks had indicated they might have a question or a comment or thought they'd like to share. Now would be that time. Or not.
I'll say something.
Okay.
I guess I have a question for you, and it's also a comment. How unusual is our communal situation, having 3 separate parishes under the umbrella of, it's a little...
It is not the least bit unusual
It's not,
anymore.
okay.
No.
So one of the, as we talked here at our table, we talked about the difficulty in identifying visitors, because we have 3 parish communities, you know, especially now with our Sunday experience, we're really encouraging people to break out of the my church thing, and so you're seeing people who, it's okay to still welcome them, but it might change the way you welcome them, right? So you're not welcoming them necessarily as somebody who's completely new to the community. So the question really is, I mean, you have 2 different ways. You're still welcoming. You want to be welcoming, but when we're talking about welcoming the visitor, the person who's completely new to our tri-parish community, the hurdle is to identify them.
Not necessarily, and I'll tell you what. The initial reaction, we have a very good example of this in Waukesha. There are 4 parishes. And they have branded themselves, if you will, as the Catholic community of Waukesha, 1 pastor and associates. So they have people from all 4 parishes. If I'm walking into Mass at a parish I don't usually go to and the greeter doesn't know me and that greeter just says, "Good morning, welcome. If there's anything I can help you with, anything you'd like to know, please ask." If they're from the church down the corner, they may or may not have the same questions. If there's anything you'd like to know about our parish or its ministries, if that person is new and they might say, "Yeah, you know, I might want to know more about your school," your conversation will help identify them. There's no way with them walking in your door, you're going to know if this is their first time in a church or if they've just come from the church down the street.
Okay, so that's as a greeter. I'm talking about as somebody who's attending Mass, standing in the pews.
Same thing. Hi, nice to see you. Welcome. Same thing. Because if it's a face you don't recognize, that's when I said reach out, say hello, extend your hand to a face you don't recognize. It will have the same effect on the person down the street for building community as it will with the brand new person going, okay, same process. If it's a face you don't know, that person is new. Whether they're brand new or new to you. Hopefully that helps. And when you get deeper in the weeds, when you get into the registration processes, the mentoring families, all of that, when people actually want to register, you can identify them. If they're gonna come back a couple of times, but you don't know if they're from a different parish or whatever, you just have to continue with the, "Hi, welcome. Glad to see you with us today. Where do you usually worship?" You can ask. "Oh, you know, this is my first, I haven't picked a church yet, I'm new to the city." "Oh, I'm from St. Williams." "Oh, okay. Glad to see you," you know. So, it's kind of a conversation.
When we were talking as a group, we thought it was a good idea to start off the Mass, you know, saying who are the visitors like you suggested, and so that we know them, you know, around us who,
And I will tell you,
because some
that's
are gonna be maybe too shy to do what you
Some
asked
do.
to do, you know, and that would be like the icebreaker, or, you know, like before.
and that's a liturgical choice between pastor and liturgy as well. Some parishes begin with that. Some ask folks to stand for blessing after communion because there are liturgical conversations there. But having some way of doing it, it's just like mothers standing at Mother's Day and fathers standing at Father's Day. It's the same kind of thing. So that's a great idea. And you're right, it gives people the choice. If I'm like really new here, but I'm not standing up, they don't have to. But if it's like, well, how nice. Because you will have one. Yes, ma'am.
What's your best recommendation for a lead-in for, you've been going to church, the people that sit behind you or 2 or 3 pews behind, you've seen them for 20 years, but you don't even know their name. What's your recommendation?
My lead-in is I'm the person,
That would like to greet them, without acting like, well, I've seen you for 20 years, you know?
you know what? That's not entirely, you know what though? People are going to say, hi, you know, and hi, you know, I have been shaking your hand for 10 years, and we really never formally met. I'm Barb.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with that, because it's true. They've been seeing you for 20 years as well, or 10 years, or whatever. And you can even, if you want to introduce yourself and you don't want to necessarily, you know, if you're shaking their hand during sign of peace, there's nothing wrong with sign of peace and saying quietly, you know, peace be with you. I'm Barb. Just to start out that way. And then, when you leave church, see which way they go. And if you're walking with them, if they're only a couple of pews away as you're walking out, you know, we've been seeing each other for a long time. I'm Barb Vite, my son's in school, you know. Really nice to see you. I'd love to meet you, know more about you. It's an informal thing, but these are tiny things that make a huge difference in aggregate. Yes, ma'am.
We had a pastor that would every once in a while say, all right, now it's the handshake piece to find someone who you didn't know there. So, you know, don't turn around and shake hands with the person behind you, but you may have to go back 3 pews to find somebody that you had not,
Sometimes
you
that
know,
happens.
so it's intentional by him, from him,
Sometimes.
to extend yourself beyond.
And a lot of that depends on layout of the church, a lot of that depends on liturgical preference of the pastor, a lot of that depends on the day. Some parishes have done that. If, let's just say, in a certain parish, where children are gonna be studying for First Reconciliation, and the books are blessed at church, and the families come and pick up the books, and we know there's a lot of people in the church who aren't normally there at this mass. Sometimes the pastor will take that opportunity to say, you know, we've got a lot of folks with us today who don't normally come to this mass. Not normally don't come to mass, because that would be bad. But don't normally come to this mass. True, but you don't want to go there. So you want to say, so then he'll say, you know, today is a special day. We've got a lot of people with us who aren't normally at the 8:30 mass. Look for somebody you don't know. So again, all of these things will differ by parish. Every single one of these that you do will have an impact. This is like ripples in a pond. So when we want to engage those who are with us and get our new folks excited and our folks who are in the pews excited, we have a lot of folks who are very loyally coming to Mass each week, who do not know about the richness of the parish and its parishes and their ministries, who don't know about all of the lives we touch as Catholic parishes. They know about Sunday Mass. So helping them be engaged and get excited about who we are and what we do is how we grow that community. And once we grow that community, as I said, the engagement and the financial resources, given best practices there as well, will come. It is 10:45. I promised you 10:45. If anybody has any questions, I am here. But I want to thank you all for coming. I hope you found this a valuable time. We're so appreciative of you being here. It's still snowing, but it's light and fluffy, so it's not too bad. Thanks so much for coming, and I bid you a good morning.
Thank you.
What are our little